This meeting is being recorded.
As part of our continuing series from the Shabbos Ohel group, we've asked Rabbi Dolphin to speak to us this evening, straight from Borough Park, on the holy day of Rosh Hashanah, which is quickly approaching. So, Rabbi Dolphin, it's all yours.
Thank you, Yaakov, and everyone else. Yashar Koyach for the opportunity. So I want to begin with a story that happened over 100 years ago in a little tiny town called Chaslavich. Chaslavich was the town in which Rabbi Soloveitchik, the Rosh Hashiva, former Rosh Hashiva of Yeshiva University, his father was the Rav there. And he would always repeat the following, that the town was really mostly a Hasidic town. Most of the Jews that lived there were Hasidim and Lubavitcher, Chabad Hasidim. But the Rabbonim, the rabbis over the years, were Litvaks. And the reason for that was because this is the tradition that he shared, that when the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, was running away from Napoleon, he made his way towards Chaslavich, which is near Kiev in that area, and they gave him a place to stay, and they saved his life. And because the people in Chaslavich did that, they said that from here on, we're going to, the Alter Rebbe said to his Hasidim, you should have a Litvische rabbi as the rabbi of your Hasidic shul. I mean, it's hard to imagine that today, but frankly, about 50 years ago, there were Young Israel shuls which were Litvish, and they had Chabad Rabbanim, Chabad rabbis, and others. And this is the way it was. So what happened here was, on Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Soloveitchik records this himself, both in writing and on tapes. The Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik, Rabbi Soloveitchik's father, gets up to the bima. It's now the high time. We're going to blow the shofar, and everyone knows that the shofar is the peak moment of Rosh Hashanah. And he calls up the Baal Tokeya. In other words, he was not the Baal Tokeya, he was the rabbi, the Rav, and he went to the bima, and he calls up a Lubavitcher Chassid, who was the Baal Tokeya, the one blowing the shofar. And as the Chabad Chassid gets to the bima, he breaks out weeping, and he can't begin to blow the shofar. Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Moshe, turns to the Chabad Chassid and he says, "Why are you crying now? Would you cry if now was Sukkot and it was time to take your lulav and your esrog and to make the bracha? Would you also cry? Please, make the bracha and start blowing the shofar." The story ends right there. And the question that Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, the great genius and Rosh Hashiva and Rav, asked is, why did my father have such a stern response to a Jew who feels so moved and so in awe of Hashem, of God, that he can't begin to blow the shofar before he goes through an emotional experience? That's one question. The other question that I ask is, would a Chabad Rav have said that to a Baal Tokeya who happens to be a Chabadnik? Would he have said the same thing? And I argue that he wouldn't. And this is a segue to tonight's class and to the overall group here that's involved with Chabad and the Ohel. I'm going to share with you insights, some of which are halachic, some of which are Talmudic, But primarily I'm going to use a more Kabbalistic and Hasidic approach, because the halachic and traditional approach, you have your rabbanim, your rabbis, and it's searchable on the internet. You don't really need me for that. I'm sure you have your own sources. So let us begin with page 20. I want to go to page 20 in the Machzor. And this is a prayer that we're saying currently twice a day during Shachris and during Mincha, which is called LeDavid Hashem Ori V'Yishi, to David. God, you are my light and my salvation. Mimi'ira, from who do I have to fear? I have no one to fear, because you are my light and my salvation. This is chapter 27 in Tehillim. And there's a background. When we say, when a psalm is inserted into the prayer book, into the Siddur, there's a reason for it. It's not because they had nothing better to do than to insert it. Because frankly, since it's part of Psalms of Tehillim, why put it into the Siddur? When it's time to say Tehillim, recite Psalms. And we find throughout the prayer book, both throughout the week and the prayer book of Shabbos and Yom Tov, we see continuous insertions of Psalms. And you have to ask yourself why. And that's what I want to talk about for a moment here. Why is Psalm 27, which becomes known as the Psalm of Chodesh Elul? So before we get to Rosh Hashanah, we are in Chodesh Elul. There's 14 days left, 2 weeks left, right? Pretty much. And it's the countdown. It's the countdown. We're at the goal line, okay? We're getting to the goal line. And what prayer could we identify as the unique prayer of Chodesh Elul is LeDavid Hashem Ori V'Yishi, Psalm 27. Of course, there's also the blowing of the shofar each morning, but that's not a psalm, that's not a prayer. So what is the history of this psalm? Well, basically, the commentaries tell us the following. King David was a warrior. He was a king that fought wars. And that's why, Hashem says, I'm sorry, you will not build the temple, the Beis HaMikdash, the holy temple. Because, and the quote is, Dam Rav Shafachta, you spilled too much blood. Yes, for the sake of God. But nevertheless, your hands were full of blood. And the Beis HaMikdash, the holy temple, is a place of shalom, peace, Yerushalayim. Has the word shleimut, completion, wholesomeness, and shalom, and peacefulness. For the Beis HaMikdash to be built, it needs someone who is associated with shalom. And who is that? Your son, Shlomo HaMelech. Also, the word Shlomo associated with the word shalom, peace. But you, David, you're not the one that's going to build the temple. Nevertheless, you were someone who fought wars for God and had a lot of inner struggles and outer struggles. And just for a moment, when we look in Psalms, and you read the Psalms, the Tehillim, and you see how David was a chaste man, a pursued man, your heart goes out for him. What did he do already that he deserved that his son and King Shaul HaMelech, it's unbelievable from all sides. And therefore, chapter 18 of Psalm in Tehillim is all about him asking Hashem to save him from King Saul, and on and on and on. So, David HaMelech represents the part of the Jew, of the person who needs to deal with struggles, with issues, with pain, with battle. And this psalm is part of that overall message. And what is the message? The message is like this. And why do we say it during Elul? This month, we all know, is the famous acronym Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. Aleph Lamed Vav. Elul is an acronym for I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. A verse in Song of Songs, Shira Shirim, right? It's explained in many Svarim, including Chabad Chassidus, beginning with the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, that Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li represents the activity that is initiated begins with man going towards God. And yes, the king comes into the field, so God really, goes first into the field, and then the Alter Rebbe says in the Maimer, if you read it carefully, we need to do something, get off our couch and get into the field. You can have Hashem in the field, you can have God in the field, but if you remain stagnant and uninterested, God in the field, God here, God there, makes no difference. So the Alter Rebbe says that Hashem is in the field, and Hashem wants you to come into the field. And when you come into the field, He's dressed like a fieldsman. You're dressed in your golf clothing, in your sweatpants. You're not dressed up like Yaakov said to Shlomo with his tie. Now is not a time for ties. Now is not a time for these formalities. Now we are whoever we are. That's who we are. We can relate to each other in a real comfortable way if we're regular guys. If you have to get all dressed up and spiffed up, and so this person feels a little uncomfortable, that person. So Elul is a time when we're in the field, we're regular guys. But remember, you're in the field with a king, and the king is there to help you. What is the issues that you need help with? The battles, the struggles, the urges. Every one of us, in a different way, has an issue. Every one of us has something that we have to contend with. Every one of us has, arguments in various ways, and some are inner and some are outer. That's why the one who recommended that we say this psalm is a Jew by the name of Rabbi Yamin Beinish Kohen, and it was published. He published it first in 1706. Okay, as part of the prayer service. For 1,000 years from when the Siddur began, from the Anshe Knesset Agdoila till 1706, they didn't say, or we don't know about this prayer being part of the text during Elul. The first one to record it is this rabbi in a sefer called, it's called Shem Tov Katan. Now that's very interesting. Just parenthetically, the name Shem Tov, we have a name like that in Chabad, right? The name Shem Tov was, what does it mean? Good name, Pirkei Avos. Ethics of the Father says, the Keser Shem Tov, and a crown of a good name, Al Kulan, is greater than all the other crowns, Keser Malchus, etc., the other crowns. So Shem Tov was a general name for someone who stood out in his sincerity and his commitment and his piety, etc. So this individual, I guess they gave him a name in addition to his regular name, Shem Tov, and they named the sefer Shem Tov HaKatan, 1706. So he's the first one to record this prayer as part of the service. So historically, it's important to know that we don't see a record of it for 1,000 years. Not that we have a lot of documents for those 1,000 years, but nevertheless, we don't see it first recorded, and then it becomes recorded, and all communities, from Ashkenaz to Sfard to Hasidim, everyone says it. The question is, do you say it after Mincha, before, after Ma'ariv, during Mincha? There's many different customs. You should know when it's actually said, but everyone says it. So everyone's on the same page. And that is that Chodesh Elul is a time to deal with struggles. Just like King David HaMelech, fought battles on behalf of Hashem. So that's a general introduction to the chapter that we're saying now. He writes there, the Rabbi Cohn, he writes an amazing thing, and he says there that the state of holiness and purity and focus that given to this chapter will bring salvation, will bring light, will bring a cleansing to the person, where the person works out that issue that is problematic and difficult. This is what he says. Another thing that he writes there is, we know, and the Alter Rebbe brings this in this Maimer L'Kutei Torah, Anila Doidi, that the 13 attributes of mercy, known as the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, are present during the month of Elul. And I want to point out that every day Evan, every day we say in the section of prayers after the Amidah, we say Vayavar Hashem al panav vayikra Hashem Hashem Kele Racham. We say the 13 attributes. So that's the daily 13 attributes. Then we have the 13 attributes of Elul, and then we have the 13 attributes of Yom Kippur. I'm not going to go into an explanation the different aspects of the 13 attributes, but just to make you aware that there's daily 13 attributes, there's Elul 13 attributes, and there's Yom Kippur 13 attributes. What is the concept of the 13 attributes during Elul? They are an aid, and it's creating the playing field to be ripe to do tshuva, to return to God, to be successful in working out your issues. So it happens to be, if you look into the chapter here, you will see that the name of Hashem, the name of God, is mentioned 13 times in this chapter. So the fact that it's mentioned 13 times corresponds to the 13 attributes of mercy that God puts into the world during the month of Elul. And I thought that was an interesting tidbit. So please know that about the chapter that has 13 attributes. Now, some of the lines in the chapter here that I always found fascinating is the following. I want you to look at the second or third line. I'll read it first in Hebrew. He says, Achash sho'alti me'es Hashem. There's one thing that I ask of you, God. Oisa avakish. This is what I seek and search. Shifti beveis Hashem kol mechayai. I want to sit in the home of God always. Lachzesh b'nayim Hashem, to see His sweetness, ulavaka becholo, and to visit His chamber. L'david Hashem Ori also alludes to the holidays of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. The Midrash says Ori, light, the third letter on page 20, the third word, Ori, refers to Rosh Hashanah, light. Yishi, salvation, the fourth word on the first line, refers to Yom Kippur. And later we have the word Sukkah in one of the verses, which I'll point out soon. We have Sukkah. So it alludes to all the three holidays. But nevertheless, David is asking to sit in the house of Hashem. Why does he want to sit in the house of Hashem? I mean, David HaMelech, you're a warrior. You can accomplish sitting in the house of Hashem. You know, when I went out on Shlichus, Reb Mendel Futterfass, my great uncle, and Reb Yoel Kahn, who passed away recently, my mashpia, I asked them both, what's my job? What's my job? And they both told me, and both were from Russia, but different mindsets and different experiences. Your job is one thing, to put on tefillin with Jews and knock mezuzahs in the door and learn with people and make food for them and say l'chaim. That's your job. You're learning and giving shiurim or preparing, like I prepared here, many hours, you know. You'll get back to it. And I always said to myself, at 60, maybe I happen to be 60 now, so maybe my dream came true, where I have more time to prepare shiurim now. And it's, everyone has their avodah, their service at that particular time of their life. But my question is, David HaMelech, David, you're King David. What do you mean you want to sit in the house of Hashem? Too bad. You know what happened when Yaakov wanted